So, Michael, what does Trump need to do and what can he do realistically today if he wants to start to get that political momentum back?
That's a good question. The launch of his vice president was a joke. Let's even before we get there, let's back it up. So he has this debate with President Biden, who just completely flatlined in the debate, right? Awful, no bump. He gets shot, no bump. Goes into the convention, no bump. Launches his candidate, his vice presidential candidate, no bump. Leaves the convention, no bump. The campaign has been flatlined for a while. And while everybody was focused on the mental acuity of the current president and whether or not he would stay in the race, everyone ignored the fact that the other guy wasn't doing much better. And so now Donald Trump recognizes that, and what shows it up more than anything else is everything that's happened with Kamala Harris. Since the moment she stepped on the stage, the dynamic politically, financially, and in terms of grassroots has all changed. But more important than all of that, you know what? You guys aren't talking about him. The press, he's not leading the stories. And so this is his moment to grab those headlines back. You know, he got a little bit of juice from NABJ, where he went on stage and created some controversy in front of black reporters. That kind of got the juices flowing. And so now this is the next level of that. Who cares if he takes questions? Do you think he's going to answer any questions the press asks him? No, that's not the point. The point is for you to focus that red light in the camera on him, because Kamala Harris has done something that Joe Biden couldn't do. And that is make him potentially irrelevant in this conversation as the momentum is growing more and more and more. And what you're seeing is the Zoom meetings, the fundraising, the grassroots organization. He can't account for any of that. He can't show any of that. But what he can do is grab the nation's lens and focus it on him at Mar-a-Lago. We'll see what he says. I can pretty much predict it. It's not going to be much. But that's not the point. The point is now he's going to be in the conversation, and it's going to be breaking coverage at 2 p.m. That's the thing for him. And I think if we understand that, meanwhile, Kamala's going to continue to do her thing and continue that momentum, which Donald Trump has not been able to show right now for his campaign.
Robbie, given everything that Michael just said, and true that there is a lack of a bump, it seems, whatever Donald Trump has done in this campaign, you also both know that anybody who assumes they know how a campaign is going to turn out 3 months down the road doesn't know anything, right? Any assumptions that you make can be upended by something that happens with the economy, something that happens with a terror attack, something that happens, who knows with what. It's often the things we don't know about, a press conference by an attorney general. So if you're on the Harris team, and maybe even Trump shows some level of discipline, we'll see if that happens. But what line of attack worries you, or what that they might do that is within your control to respond to worries you?
Well, first and foremost, I think what Trump is struggling with right now is that this was a pretty easy campaign for him before all this happened. The theme was strength. He said Biden was weak. I think a lot of voters bought that, and he didn't really have to do much. So now he needs to change course. And I think I'm gonna frame this positively. I think the opportunity for Harris right now, despite being the incumbent vice president, is to be the change candidate in a change election. We're seeing change elections happen all over the world. There is a desire for change in the US in this election right now. And Trump has been so backward looking in his messaging about how, well, the economy, prices were cheaper when I was president. The world was more stable when I was president, but it's all backward looking. She has an opportunity to say, hey, we need to turn the page in our politics here in the US and go on to a new chapter. I think she's beginning to do that, but she only has about, I'd say, 2 to 3 weeks to really lock that in. So I think the danger for her right now is if Trump can get the initiative back, get the message back, which I'm kind of with Michael. I don't know. We'll see what happens today. But she must do that. She must be a change agent and the future candidate in this election, and not let Trump turn her into just another version of the Biden administration.
Yeah, I think he's right about, Michael, the fact that Donald Trump seems to be, by all reports, struggling with the idea this isn't an easy campaign anymore. And great campaigns, successful campaigns, always have to have a bit of agility, right? And the Wall Street Journal was pretty harsh, I thought, today, because he goes back to his own playbook with the attack strategy against Harris. Quote, he said he doesn't like Jewish people, though her husband is Jewish. He's attacked her racial identity, which alienates swing voters. He calls her low IQ and dumb, as if the schoolyard insult will persuade anyone. If, in fact, his own people say it shouldn't be hard, just attack Harris as a far-left liberal, focus on the issues like the economy, that's what he should be doing. Does he think that's not right? Does he not care? What's going on?
I think it's a little bit, I won't say the not care part, but I do think it's the not right part here. I think a lot of what is frustrating Donald Trump right now is that he wants to be surrounded by people who fight for him, who fight and push out narratives that he wants to see played on airways and on social media across the spectrum. And when he doesn't see that, he gets frustrated. That's what this is about. This is as much about, okay, I want the cameras to be on me, as it is y'all not doing what I want y'all to do. You're not fighting the way I want you to fight for me. You're not fighting the way I would fight. And so what you're going to see, and you got a taste of it with the NABG piece, JP. So, people go, well, why would he do that? He did it because, one, it puts him in a fighting posture. He knows he's going into what he's presuming to be a hostile setting. This afternoon will be a hostile setting. Whether he takes questions or not, that's not the point. He wants to feel like he's in the fight because he doesn't think anyone's out there fighting for him the way he wants them to. So I think that pushes a lot of the storyline here. And I think with respect to where, the Harris campaign finds itself right now, let Donald Trump go in and do his thing with himself. That's fine. Because when you talk about the policy, and this is going to be a problem, okay, what Robbie said is right. When they talk about policy, he's looking back. So tell me what the policy is looking forward. You've got members out there on Wall Street right now worried about a recession. What's your advice to the Fed? What's your plan if that happens? How do you position healthcare in 2025? Because last time I heard you said you wanted to repeal and replace Obamacare, but you couldn't do that. So what about that? We now got infrastructure in place. What more do we need to do in the nation's infrastructure? Oh, that's right. You did infrastructure every day for 4 years and couldn't get it done. Oh, and immigration. What's your policy there, since you killed the most conservative policy on immigration in 25 years? So he doesn't necessarily want to talk about policy in a forward position, because it exposes so much of what he failed to do when he had the mantle of power as president.